All right, I see folks coming in. It's always where that counter, otherwise it's just you and me, Meg, thinking about whether there's anyone else out there. So see everyone coming on in. So welcome everyone. This always just takes a moment. So you get me kind of awkwardly as a squirrel, kind of just running around, maybe not literally running around, but verbally running around as we wait for people to come into the room, so to speak, and rooms of every kind that we're all in this evening. And we'll get going in just about a minute. And I see people are sharing some greetings in the chat and raising a hand. But Will, if you have any questions, please feel, I see many people raising hands, which I'm not entirely sure what that's about. So let me see. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. Sorry, in the Q&A box would be great. I have motorcycles outside, so I think I'm going to add my headphones to this mix. I'm not sure if everyone else can hear them, but they're definitely very present. So 1 second while I add. Okay, hopefully everyone can still hear me all right. Oh, great. Well, no one heard the motorcycles besides me. Well, now you get to all not hear them still. And again, I'm going to just, raising hands doesn't work so well in a webinar. So if there is a question that you have, feel free to, again, put it in the Q&A box or the chat. I'll try to grab it in the chat if it's there. If everyone also wants to share like what they're reading, always a welcome question, a welcome thing to share. And I think we'll just give it about 10 more seconds and then we'll get going. And again, just to remember, if you have questions, you're welcome to add them throughout Meg's presentation, and then we'll get to them in about half an hour. The Q&A box is a great place to put them because otherwise I might miss them. I'll do my best in the chat, but Q&A box, excellent place to put those questions at any point during the conversation, and we'll get, not during the conversation, during the presentation, we'll get to as many as we can. And let's see, okay. All right, everyone, welcome from all over the place, and we'll get started. Okay. All right, hi. I'm Katie Freeman, and on behalf of Mystery Writers of America, welcome to MWA University. MWA U 2024 includes 6 online sessions taught by top-notch crime writers, and here we are at session 2 with Meg Gardiner. A reminder that these classes are free to current MWA members, so if you're not a member yet, consider this an enticing reason to join. I'll also just note that I'm not coming to you from the Oval Office, which I know an address is happening at this moment as well, but here we are talking about crime writing. And for our session tonight, Meg will be presenting again for about 30 minutes, and then I'll come back on screen to facilitate those audience questions that you have. So be sure to share them in the Q&A box, please, and we'll get to as many as we can. I'll also be sharing links to buy Meg's book from Murder by the Book in Houston, our partner bookstore for this series. I come to you from Brooklyn, if anyone heard me about to mispronounce Houston as Houston Street, but Murder by the Book, so you can see all of Meg's books, or from any local bookstore or requests from your library. And now to introduce Meg. Meg Gardiner is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 16 novels. Her thrillers have won the Edgar Award and have been summer reading picks by The Today Show and O, the Oprah magazine. In August 2022, Heat 2, co-authored with Michael Mann, debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. A former lawyer, 2-time president of Mystery Writers of America, and 3-time Jeopardy champion, Meg lives in Austin. And I wonder which of those 3 experiences or identities was the most thrilling, with apologies for the bad pun.
It's MWA here. What do you think?
I figured I could do it. And actually, I'm genuinely curious. So, our session topic today is plotting to kill, writing mysteries and thrillers. And the question at hand is, how do you create compelling characters and put them in memorable conflict? Meg, we're ready to hear your tips and tricks to ramp up suspense in our stories. Take it away.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here. And let's talk about plotting to kill. which is the title of the talk. Plotting doesn't have to relate to killing or anything else, but everything I talk about tonight will generally be applicable to crime writing, mystery, suspense, thrillers, but also to other kinds of fiction that you write or even nonfiction. So let's get started. I will begin by talking about what I mean when we're going to be talking about plot here tonight. The way I'm going to use it here in the talk is that plot is equivalent to the storyline. It's the main story in of a literary or dramatic work. So I want to make sure that we understand plot is not simply a sequence of events. It is the cause and effect relationship between the events in the story. It's the character's journey toward a goal or desire that's told through a series of conflicts. So there are archetypal plots. You've probably heard of them: Overcoming the Monster, Voyage and Return, Rags to Riches, Rebirth. The novelist John Gardiner said that there were only 3 plots in existence. A young man sets out on a quest, boy meets girl, or a stranger rides into town. And whether or not you believe this or not, those 3 plots can have sustained us for millennia. The quest covers everything from Arthurian legend to Luke Skywalker to the young teenage heroine of the Predator movie Prey. Boy meets girl, that's everything from Cinderella to Gone Girl. And A Stranger Rides into Town is every Jack Reacher novel, and if you want to stretch it, it's Jaws. So there's plenty of room within these story structures for like infinite variety of stories. So the question we're going to talk about here a little bit is about story structure, how you build your plot. And hang on, let me pull up my notes here. I'm sure you've heard people say, some stories are plot oriented, some are character oriented, and that's true to an extent, but remember that plot and character are 2 sides of the same coin. No story is ever solely plot or solely character driven. As novelist Chuck Wendig says, plot is what the characters do. Plot develops from the characters' choices and actions. And any person in the story, their true character, what lies inside them at their core, that is revealed and developed and formed and shaken up by the choices that the person in the story makes under pressure. So as an author, the greater the pressure applied to a character, the deeper the revelation is going to be about who they are. Are they brave? Are they cowardly? Are they compassionate? Are they cruel? Are they ruthless? Are they arrogant? Are they humble? All these choices, all these characteristics will be revealed by putting the character under pressure. And the greater the pressure, the deeper the revelation will be, and the truer the choice to the character's essential nature. So as you develop a story, ideally, the story will develop, will build to bigger and bigger tests of character as it goes along. Structure of a story ideally does build progressively. Good stories are designed to put increasing pressure on characters, forcing them to take increasing risks and to make increasingly difficult choices. So all that builds to a final irrevocable choice that will take place at the climax of the story, someplace a point of no return where the characters are going to make an irrevocable decision. Ideally, in a story, you'll give your protagonist a dilemma. This means at the climax, you don't just simply give them a choice, am I going to live in paradise or am I going to go back to the scrap heap? That's not really a choice, is it? Give them a wrenching choice, put them in a position where they must choose between irreconcilable goods or the lesser of two evils. You can't save the bus full of nuns and the kitten farm, to give an extreme example, but force them to make tough choices. Now, the classic story structure, we talk about terms like it starts with an inciting incident. This is some act that brings chaos into the protagonist's world, that upsets the balance of forces in the protagonist's life, that goes through progressive complications, climax, crisis, resolution. And all of this is a little bit of jargon to get to get to the crux of what plotting a story is. You want to create an active protagonist who wants something and wants it now. And you want to create a powerful antagonist whose desires clash with those of the protagonist. Obstructing desire is the essence of plotting. You have to figure out, what does the protagonist want? What is stopping him or her from achieving it? Your job as the writer is to thwart the protagonist's desire. Don't make it easy for him to get what he wants. And you do this through what's called the principle of antagonism. A protagonist and his story can often only be as fascinating and emotionally compelling as the forces of antagonism make them. And when I say forces of antagonism, I'm talking about the sum total of all the forces that oppose the character's will and desire. It can be inner forces of antagonism, personal forces, or extra-personal. For example, an inner force of antagonism might be a character's fear of flying, but they need to get to Asia from New York. A personal level of antagonism might be a character's bad relationship with his mother from childhood. Extra-personal forces of antagonism, well, guess what? There's an asteroid barreling toward Earth, and maybe the protagonist is the one who has to do something about it. So create the protagonist who wants something now. Remember what Kurt Vonnegut said, that your characters should want something on every page, even if it's only a drink of water. So think about your protagonist's conscious and unconscious desires, motivations, and fears. Then create an antagonist with equally powerful desires, motivations, and fears. And you put these people in conflict. They can't both get what they want. They will try to stop, blockade, evade, subvert, escape the other. Make sure they can't. Now you do that by creating a crucible for the story. I learned this concept from the books of veteran editor Saul Stein. So the crucible is the container that holds the characters together as things heat up. So what throws the protagonist and antagonist together in a white-hot cauldron and keeps their conflict boiling? Characters who are in a crucible, this cauldron can't or won't declare a truce and quit. The key thing is that their motivation to keep opposing each other is greater than their motivation to run away. I mean, in ordinary life, everyday life, we might say, that's not my battle, not my circus, not my monkeys. You got to make sure that in your story, the hero is trapped in that circus tent with those monkeys. So the crucible, it can be a physical or emotional environment that bonds people. It could be a school. Kids can't just be truant. If you got a YA story, the kids got to be in school, right? It could be a family. You can't quit your family. It could be a job. It could be the military. It could be a prison. It could be a wilderness, a spaceship, an arena. Gladiator 2 is coming out, right? So who are these characters? Protagonists should be active. Here's 4 big questions to ask yourself about your protagonist. Well, who is she or he? What does she want? What conflicts or fears are standing in her way? And what is at stake? Now, stakes in what will be won or lost if she succeeds or fails. If you're writing suspense or certainly a thriller, at some point, the stakes are going to become life and death. Possibly just psychological life and death or professional life and death, but if it's a real thriller, physical death should be on the line at some point. Antagonists. Ask the same 4 questions about antagonists. What do they want? What do they fear? What are the stakes for them? And remember, villains should be clever and powerful. Don't write stick figure villains. Create charismatic villains that readers are curious about, that they want to see on the page, that they flip the pages waiting to see what's going to happen when this character appears again. You do this by giving them energy, dignity, intelligence, some redeeming qualities. Maybe they run the kitten farm, even though they're like an arms trafficker, but they love kittens. Something that is some kind of a redeeming quality. Remember that between the protagonist and antagonist, opposition is what is key. The antagonist stands in the way of the protagonist's goals. He causes the conflict. He makes trouble for the protagonist. He's the one upping the stakes. He's the one changing the game and making it harder. And remember, again, antagonists will think that their actions are justified. That's one reason they are not about to quit. They think they are in the right. Their motives may be twisted. They might have blinders on, but in their minds, they have every good reason for doing what they're doing. And especially in a mystery, sometimes where you don't know the identity of the killer. I write a series called Unsub, and that stands for unknown subject. There's always an unknown perpetrator out there. So you don't have them on the page in conflict right up against the protagonist openly. But again, going back to Chuck Wendig, he says when you create a great antagonist, you're painting with shadows. That's the power of the antagonist. An antagonist can help define the protagonist the same way an artist can define a shape by coloring everything but that shape. So keep that in mind. The antagonist will help shape the protagonist as the story progresses. And in these big books where life and death are the stakes, the antagonist is often monstrous in the sense that they are distorted in some respect. They have a blind spot or a distortion field in how they view the world. Maybe the protagonist can figure that out, can find out where their blinders are, and can exploit it as a weakness and use it to defeat them. So let's talk now about structuring a plot. I think probably a lot of us are writing classically designed stories, so they're going to have beginnings, middles, and endings. Let's talk about that. Beginnings. Where to start? I recommend starting as close to the ending as possible. I mentioned the term, the inciting incident. This is something that radically upsets the balance of forces in the protagonist's life. That should come very early in the story. So that means I would suggest you don't open with the protagonist waking up, the protagonist staring out the window, pondering life, dream sequences, backstory. In general, don't spend time setting the table. Don't give us a playbill. Launch into the story. Figure out what the chase is and cut to it. One way you can do this is, if you're concerned that the story is getting after a slow start, think about whether you've begun too early. You could pick a pivotal action scene and start your novel or story in the middle of it. Call this the combat landing. It doesn't have to be literal. Some examples, Lee Child's first novel, Jack Reacher novel, Killing Floor, the first lines are, "I was arrested in Eno's diner at 12 o'clock. I was eating eggs and drinking coffee." Stephen King's novel, The Gunslinger, opens, "The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed." You're there, you're in it. So this would be introducing your major character when he or she is already in the midst of some pivotal conflict. Gets the reader instantly involved. You don't have to do this every time, but that's one way to make sure that that you've kickstarted your story, and then you can fill in necessary information later, or realize what is irrelevant and leave that out. If you do it this way, then once the story has momentum, you can pause to bring readers up to date on necessary background information. For example, Jaws, the movie, opens with a swimmer getting attacked. And it's only after that that we meet Sheriff Brody, whose easy summer job has just been thrown completely out of kilter. In Jurassic Park, the film, it opens with an animal wrangler getting grabbed and pulled into a cage with a vicious, unseen predator. And then we go to the scene with the lawyers, where they say that the park needs more vetting before it's opened to the public. Know what the chase is, figure it out, and cut to it. The middle. Now, when I took a college creative writing class from Ron Hansen, who's a novelist, he wrote, among other things, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which was made into a movie with Brad Pitt. And he told us that every story has a beginning, a muddle, and an ending, which took me years to figure out how to handle this. But the trick in the middle of the story is to keep the action building. Throughout the middle section of a story, the stakes, the level of risk, the tension, the confrontations that you show, and the revelations should all build in importance. Like I said, you build progressive complications into the story. You never get a hero out of trouble without putting him in a worse predicament. To keep the tension building, you can add time pressure. The lieutenant gives the detective 24 hours to solve the case before he's transferred. Deadlines. You can tighten the personal connection between characters. The detective, your hero, finds out that one of the victims is related to his best friend. Something like that. If you have scenes with minor characters, can you rewrite them to involve major characters instead? That's going to carry more emotional weight, and that's going to keep readers involved and concerned about what's going on with these people. Now, you want to maintain and increase suspense. The term suspense comes from the Latin term suspendere, which means to hang up. And the writer is the one who's keeping readers dangling. Saul Stein, again, he says that as the writer, you want to arouse the reader's curiosity and keep them curious about what's going to happen for as long as possible. So what creates suspense? Situations that create suspense: prospective danger to a character, actual danger to a character, an unwanted confrontation, an old fear that's about to become present reality, a life crisis that requires immediate attention. The writer's duty is to set up some scenario that cries out for resolution, and then act irresponsibly, head in another direction, deal with other issues in the characters' lives, prolong and exacerbate the reader's desperate need for resolution. You raise a question and you hold off answering it as long as possible. So don't eliminate the prospective danger to a character. Don't let the character overcome the immediate danger without facing an even greater danger. If your character is apprehensive about some unwanted confrontation, make sure you hold off that confrontation as long as possible. And when this old fear is about to become reality, don't relieve it. Make the situation worse than the character anticipated. If the character's life crisis requires immediate action, make sure the action backfires. You can prolong the crisis. Now, small victories are okay, and you do want, of course, give readers breathing room. This tension can't be unrelenting. Otherwise, it just starts to sound like a din, like traffic noise, and can become too emotionally overwhelming. So there's an ebb and flow. There's times for lighthearted moments, for a bit of comedy, for an evening off for the characters. Maybe your characters have actual family lives and friends. Give them a second to enjoy those, but keep the plot churning in the background always, so that it's never completely gone. Now, how do you tighten the screws to create this tension? You want to increase the risk. More methods you can do this. Set a deadline. Start a clock ticking down. Michael Crichton was an expert at this. The storm is going to hit at sunset. The last plane out leaves in 3 hours. In the movie High Noon, the bad guys are rolling into town. Guess when? And the sheriff, the townspeople can't avoid that. You need an antidote. Someone's been poisoned and will die if they don't get the antidote within 60 minutes, something like that. In my new book, Shadowheart, which is just out a few weeks ago, I have a killer running across subway tracks in New York City, being pursued, and the sign above the platform starts flashing, train approaching in 1 minute. So you'd better get a move on. You can add pitfalls, stumbling blocks that make the problem worse for the protagonist. Say a prime suspect turns out to be innocent, a key witness turns up dead, the murderer strikes again, a detective is framed for the killing, important evidence disappears. As the story develops, you can increase the level of threat that the main character faces. Say at the beginning, it's just they've got to solve the case, or it will be a professional embarrassment. Maybe then it becomes physically risky for them. They might face injury, and eventually, again, they're facing their own survival, or the survival of people that they care about. Let's see. Briefly, I'll give you some more of what not to do, because these are some of my favorite things, because I've done them all myself, learned the hard way. What not to do, how to kill tension and suspense. Let's call this the saggy middle. You've heard of a saggy, soggy middle. Things just seem to stagnate. So sometimes it's because you fail to raise the stakes, or you retreat to lower stakes. You repeat the same plot point over and over again. There's another argument over how clean the dry cleaning is in the laundromat. Take a break and go into long flashbacks and backstory that doesn't impact the drama or the important points in the story going forward. Or you end chapters by tying scenes up in a nice tight bow. You never want to end a chapter with the characters calmly lying their head on a pillow and turning out the light and dozing off to sleep, because believe me, that's exactly what your reader's going to do, and that's what you don't want to have happen. Let's see. All right. Endings. We'll go on and talk about endings here. Ideally, you want to make them surprising yet inevitable. Create a dilemma for the protagonist. Send them to the point of no return, where they face a crisis of a choice between irreconcilable goods or the lesser of two evils, followed by climactic action. You ideally want to, in a big thriller, you want to leave your hero or heroine with their back up against the wall, out of ammunition, out of room to run. Nothing left for them to do except dig deep into their whatever their skills are, and find new skills, brains, brawn, ingenuity, and pull some surprise out of their hat. Think of Die Hard, where John McClane looks like he is bloodied and beaten, and he is bloodied. but he's got a gun taped to his back, and is able to pull that out and rescue his wife at the last second. And then, of course, the part of this is at the climax is you need what's called the obligatory scene. This is the meeting of the two opposing characters or forces to resolve the issue between them. It's the scene that must happen. In a traditionally structured play or novel, it's the point at or near the end when the two main opposing characters come together. It has to be a powerful scene where they resolve the issue between them once and for all. The protagonist must be active and must face the antagonist. And if you can force the main character to perform heroically while facing their greatest fear, this will be an additional triumph. I mentioned Chief Brody in Jaws. He hates the water. He wants to stay on dry land, but to save the town, he has to get out on the open ocean. In Michael Connelly's first novel with Harry Bosch, The Black Echo, Harry Bosch is claustrophobic. It goes back to his days as a tunnel rat in Vietnam. But the only way he's going to catch these bank robbers is if he goes into the tunnels, into the sewers underneath LA. So guess where he's got to go. Things not to do. What'll kill your ending? Deus ex machina. You probably heard that term before. Coincidence. The protagonist is passive. Other people solve their problems for them. The villain gives up or conveniently dies. Please don't do that. And then you want to give the audience what it wants, but not the way it expects. That surprise done right. And if you're wondering how to come up with surprises when mulling the next step in your story, you can consider what's the most natural, obvious thing to happen. Then think of the opposite. Turn the scenario inside out. Have the protagonist do the reverse of what you thought of at first. You might not use those ideas, but doing this exercise can break you out of cliches and start opening up story possibilities. Ideally, you can make it personal for the protagonist and antagonist. Keep away from cliches. The cop's partner gets killed on his last day. The hero's family is held hostage. You can turn a case personal in other ways. Something about the victim resonates with the detective's childhood, or a class resentment against the judge ticks off a defense attorney. But if you've set up the characters, set up their lives and the conflict, then the surprise that becomes inevitable lands in a really satisfying way. And I think that if this is still a spoiler for anybody out there, then too bad. But think of the ending to The Empire Strikes Back. Darth Vader asks Luke, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. And Luke, of course, thinks he knows. And so does the audience think that we know exactly what happened to him, that Darth Vader killed him. And then, thump, thump, thump. We're shocked. I remember sitting in the theater and being shocked when he said, "No, I am your father." And you're like, "No way, that can't be happening. That's not true." And then you think, "Oh yeah, now it all makes sense." And then it drives the story forward again in a new way. So that's basically my beginnings, middles, ending. And I think it's probably a good time to head over to questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Meg. And again, we welcome those questions in the Q&A box. We've got one there, but before we turn to them, I just wanted to quote from a few things that you said about plot and character are two sides of the same coin. Give them a retching choice. I still have this bus full of nuns and the kittens. I'm very anxious about what choice is going to happen between the two of them. The idea of obstructing desire and forces of antagonism. The idea that the villain would just give up was hilarious. I know that is surprise not done right. So we definitely are not going to do this. And that you can give an evening off for the characters. which I felt like I was like having a sigh of relief for these characters, but to keep the plot churning. And I also just want to say, Meg, I feel like you would just be fantastic in a movie club, or a book club or any other with all of the examples that you gave. So, and I
I'm
shared
a
some,
fan.
oh,
What can I
sorry, go ahead,
say?
Meg.
I know I say I'm a fan.
Yes, yes, clearly. And you have many fans in the chat too. I so we'll turn to some of these questions. Sorry, I was going to say something that I've completely forgotten. So that's my own little surprise happening right there. Oh, I was going to say you did give so many great examples, and I tried to share some of the titles that you mentioned from Solstein and others.
Yeah.
And we can follow up with some of those as well. And congratulations on Shadowheart. Again, if you don't have that, please order a copy. Let's turn to some of these. Let's start with what are your thoughts on writing unreliable narrators in a thriller? And what are good techniques for writing them effectively?
It's tricky. There have been a lot of recent thrillers with unreliable narrators, especially I mentioned Gone Girl, which is the whole premise of the novel. There were plenty of ways to do it. A narrator could be unreliable because they're lying, because they're trying to scam the readers or the people in their lives. They can be unreliable because they have a very limited perspective. And that might be interesting, that they've only got a very limited view of a situation and don't have the maturity, or the emotional depth to really see the full situation, and that can affect their their actions as well as the way that they tell the story. Sometimes people don't get correct information. This is like the missed connections story, where someone hears part of a conversation and draws the wrong conclusions from it. That can get frustrating and old sometimes for readers, I think. But think about why you would want to use an unreliable narrator. I think who is it going to be? If it's the narrator, it's going to be a main character. And what are you trying to do? You can use it to create great twists. You don't want to use it to betray the reader, make the readers feel like you're betraying them. That they invest everything in a character, and then on the very last line they find out that they've been lied to. That can be it might land brilliantly, but it might make them feel like you've just pulled out all the struts from underneath them and just sent them crashing down. So think about it.
I really appreciate that the use of why. I feel like it's sometimes a question that we forget to ask of the choices that we make. So when you're saying why use an unreliable narrator, that might lead you to some answers that can have an impact on how you approach plot and character. So we've got a number of questions, which is great. Feel free to keep adding them, and I'll kind of go through them and maybe put some together. But let's just start with, or continue on rather, with present tense seems to be the preferred method to tell a story these days, but I find it hard to maintain. Any advice on the present tense, and does tense generally, like how you're approaching a story, do you feel like that has a big impact? Sorry, this additional question is very obvious on plot and how you approach telling a story. So, but present tense specifically.
If you're uncomfortable with it, again, think why are you trying to do it? I don't think there's any obligation to do it. I don't think if you're doing it just because you think it's it's trendy, but you don't like it. There's certainly so much fiction has been written in past tense and is still and will continue to be. Different stories may call for it. If it's sometimes I mean, the present tense can make, it gives a sense of immediacy, that things are are happening, that you are literally walking along now on the character's shoulder as the story develops. So that can be a benefit to it. If you you could just try it out, see how it feels. I think that I certainly don't think that you need to feel obligated to do it. Try a short story and see if that works first.
Oh, thank you for that. I also appreciate, I mean, even if it seems like a trend, it doesn't mean that you have to follow a trend. You can go in whatever direction the story is taking you. And along those lines, just a general question about your own process for coming up with plots. What does that look like for you? Or is it the same for all of your books? Has it evolved over the course of your career?
It's evolved. I think, I've written several series and I've written several standalones. So it's always a question of who the characters are. If it's a series novel, will the story fit with the characters' jobs, their world, their skill set? If it's a standalone, sometimes it's just been something that some bizarre story that I catch on the news, and it just sticks with me, and I'm talking to people about it, like this this company in France that was offering extreme urban reality games where it would kidnap you for $3,000 or whatever and have people grab you off the street, or they said they would tell the cops that it was all a game, but I'm thinking, like, yeah, isn't that just what the kidnappers would do if they really wanted to make sure that they got away with it? They would call the cops ahead of time and say, we're playing a game when we kidnapped this person off the street. And I kept talking to people about this. And eventually I wrote a novel called The Nightmare Thief, where a 21st birthday party for a young woman from San Francisco goes terribly awry. You'll be surprised to hear when the kidnappers take over the game and really make off with these kids.
Meg, at the beginning, I was sharing that Lee Child had said about your work that you create characters as real as your friends and a plot as real as your nightmares. And now that's going to probably be my nightmare tonight, getting kidnapped. So thank you for that. Sort of in keeping with that idea about thinking about how you come up with your plots, what do you do if you just get stuck on figuring out your story? In this person's example, they have a name, setting, but keep finding reasons why the latest plot idea they've come up with sucks and talking themselves out of it. So when you're stuck, are there any actions you take to find your way out of that, or out of the muddle also, perhaps?
Well, you can go for a run, go for a walk, go out for a coffee with a friend, do something completely different to clear your mind. And then I had an idea, and it's hang on, it'll come right back to me. It's think about, this applies to editing as well. Think about the big issues in the plot. Is the conflict strong enough? Are the characters strong enough? If you've got a protagonist who seems a little bit wishy-washy, or could be removed from the story without a whole lot changing, perhaps you need a new protagonist. Perhaps you need to up the conflict. Perhaps you need to really look at your antagonists and say, why are they doing this? Are they reveling in their badness? Could you give them some kind of a spirit of really digging the terrible things that they're doing, and start with that, or just try to turn a situation inside out. Think about where you've thought about the story going, pause it and think, what is the absolute opposite that could occur, and see what happens when you start thinking along that line.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, that question of why. Sometimes I think when we're considering plot, the question of what happens next or how it happens might be foremost, but the why is so essential. It can lead into a lot of different kind of depth, I think. Again, this is sort of like on timing, I guess, a bit, in tempo, but can you discuss the balance between getting to the chase immediately, but giving the reader enough about the character that they care, The Reacher example
Yeah.
is a statement and then a flashback to what happened. What do you think about
Mhm.
that event, then what led to it as a way to start a novel?
I mean, read, see which novels grab you, try to analyze what it is that they're doing that that pulls you into the story. There are plenty of ways to do it. Uh, you don't have to drop a body on page one. You really don't. I mean, even if you're writing it, it doesn't have to open with somebody, opening the linen cupboard and here comes Aunt Martha falling out or whatever. But I'm sorry, because um, but and it's a very good point that we need to know. We need to care about the characters to really care about the story. But often we can get to care about the characters by seeing them in action. So action, what they're doing, who they're talking to, how they talk, how they're handling an issue, that is telling us who they are. So try to that's why I said try not to set the table, try not to have a playbill, try not to have them waking up, have them in action, and think about even the smallest things can reveal a lot about them as they're moving through the page.
Now I've got Aunt Martha on the bus or on the road between the nuns and the kittens, just so
She
you know,
is,
like
yeah.
where am I? Yeah.
Okay. All
Actually, I
right.
guess she started as a dead body, so she's dead on the road between the nuns and the
Well,
kittens.
she might be what falls onto the road, and then the whole bus with the.
I think we're all at this moment grateful. I'm not a writer. Um, so
It's
staying again,
fiction. Come on.
I think it's fabulous. I mean, my mind is like ablaze, so I appreciate it as are others. We've got like another about 5 or so minutes. So if you have some last, we've got a few more questions to get to, but if you have a few more, feel free to add those to the chat as well. Chat Q&A, keep saying chat, mean Q&A. Oh, and here's a suggestion. Reacher killed the nuns with the kittens. Well, now we can collectively write a thriller by the end
Okay.
of this session.
Well, I think those must have been some really bad nuns if
I was
Reacher
thinking
went
it might be
after
some
them.
pretty bad kittens. To be all.
Yeah.
So this is a question just do you outline or write by the seat of your pants or both? And I think this question is about being a plotter or a pantser, which are terms that I learned while diving
Okay.
into
Yes.
this world. So
Right. Plotter, pantser. Some people call it architects versus gardeners.
oh,
I do outline just because I know what happens when I don't, because that's how I thought I could write a novel to begin with, and I got so lost up a creek without a paddle in a swamp that I could not hack my way out with a machete. I need, and I find it extremely helpful, and it saves me months to think about the big issues in the story, who the characters are, what the conflict is, where it starts, what the major turning points are, how the big arcs of the story, and figure out at least the outline, the shape of the ending. So once I know that, then I can think back if I started it in the right point. So I some people just love to sit down and just start writing. And there's like, let's take a road trip. Let's just see where it takes us. It's going to be fabulous. I need a map. Otherwise, I just, it just turns into soggy cotton candy. So I think whatever works for you is going to work, and that's the way you should do it. I write outlines, but if I think of something better in the middle of drafting it, I certainly will go with the better idea.
thank you for that. I feel like this question, it relates a little bit, and I wonder about it too. how do you keep a main character's arc and development progressing throughout a series? Each one has a personal journey and external plot. Do you think about character development over several books before starting the first installment? And I wonder about that when you think about the outline. Are you outlining per book? Is there also an outline for the series? But yeah, how do you keep a main character's arc and development progressing?
It's a balancing act. When you're writing a series, you want readers to come back, and they come back because they are entranced by the character that they've met. So you don't want that person to change completely. You can have them mature. You could have them, develop in their career or have events happen to them. But unless it is a well-planned seven, 7 epic novels and some, uh, you know, high fantasy saga, then readers might not want to see the character change completely. So it can be a little tricky. You don't want them to stagnate. So it's like all our lives. What can I say? And again, it depends on whether each book is going to be whether it's completely episodic, where you can pick up any of the stories, any of the novels in a series, doesn't matter which one it is, or whether there really is a really strong through line that develops. So you're just gonna have to feel your way through it.
I would like to say that I just appreciate in the chat that Reacher, the kittens, now a toothbrush, and the nuns, and let's not forget Aunt Martha. Truly, we're going to have a thriller by the end of this. So I appreciate everyone's comments in the chat as well. We've got a few last questions that are a little bit kind of one-off answers, perhaps, or they could be longer. You had mentioned a few reference books, which I've been trying to share throughout the conversation.
Mhm.
Do you have a go-to reference book you either refer to regularly or quote from? Is there something or a few things that you have turned to yourself?
I mean, there's so many wonderful just books that are very inspirational about writing. Stephen King's book on writing is great. Anne Lamott's book Bird by Bird is very inspirational and helpful. Personally, Saul Stein's book Stein on Writing, I tend to turn to that when I finish the first draft and I'm ready to edit, because it reminds me of the big points I want to keep in mind when I am editing. So I find that very helpful. If you really want to dive into story structure, there's Robert McKee's book Story, which is specifically focused on screenwriting, but it applies to all dramatic works as well.
Thank you for all of those. I was going to see if I could quickly manage to grab links for all of them, and I absolutely am not that fast. But again, Stephen King's book, I have a tattoo for Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, so it's always nice to hear that. It's on my wrist. And I did put Robert McKee's story in the chat, and up above, if you scroll up, are Saul Stein's books. This question is also about book recommendations, so I thought we'd just stick with that for our last couple of questions. Any good books on, and it might be the same answer, it occurs to me. Any good books on how to describe characters physically and how to convey their emotions, how to get into the really the depth of a character.
Again, I would send you back to Saul Stein talks about how to characterize through action, which also helps with getting the story going. You don't have to describe the color of someone's hair, the color of their shirt, the color of their eyes. You can you show them in action, show them how they move through a room. Do they stomp? Do they float? Are they graceful? Are they clumsy yet sensitive? But that helps characterize people. So characterizing through action is a great way to add depth to description.
Thank you. And that I just added that book, Saul Stein's on writing to the chat as well. And of course, you can get these books anywhere books are sold and also request them at your local library, which hopefully you have a local library. Do you, and these will be our last two questions. And Trish, thank you for that suggestion in the chat about Lisa Cron's Story Genius. Do you talk out your plots before writing with other people, or would that stifle your energy? Or generally, do you discuss your writing? I mean, when you're doing it, when you're, yeah, sorry.
Yes and
I was
no.
going to add a different question, but let's just stick with that one.
Okay. I do. I talk it out. I don't necessarily talk it out, but I send outlines and ideas and synopses and thoughts. And I do talk it out with my agent and my editor. At this point, I was in a writers group for many years before I was published, and as I started getting published. And of course, you're talking it all out with your group. And so the writers groups can be fantastic. You really need to make sure that everybody in the group has the same goals as far as developing their writing, that they really want to move forward and make progress, and that they know how to offer valuable feedback. So it can be tricky and can work or not, but when it does, it can be good.
Agreed. It's great to find that alignment to be able to have a group that functions well.
Oh, yes, and I see Marjorie Flax is added. Don't
Yes.
forget MWA's recent How to Write a Mystery, edited by Lee Child and Laurie R. King, in which I have an essay. So yes, please grab that one immediately.
Yes, thank you for that, Marjorie. And Meg, thank you for mentioning it. And I've shared the link to get that from Murder by the Book, or to check it out again anywhere you find your books. I feel like this is an impossible question, but you can answer it in any way you would like to. What is your all-time favorite thriller, book, and movie?
No way I can answer it.
What is a favorite? What is another favorite book?
Yes,
What's another recommendation amongst the many, many excellent ones that you have given?
Oh, gosh, I'll go with something totally different. I'll go read The Passage by Justin Cronin. It's science fiction.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was, how did you say, what were we talking about? Surprises? That did actually, surprises done right. So thank you. That was a surprise done right. We had such lovely comments in the chat. So thank everyone for, thank you all for those. Oh, Meg, wait, I did have one question, which is, have you ever been a Jeopardy question? Or do you know?
Book I wrote, yeah, he too was a Jeopardy question on the Jeopardy Masters tournament like 6 weeks ago. So
oh, that's fantastic! Excellent. Sorry, that's very exciting. Thank you so much for this. And just a reminder to everyone that the next MWA U session will be August 7th with Donna Andrews, the Agatha Anthony and Lefty Award winning author of the Meg Lanslow series, and who currently serves as MWA's Executive Vice President. She'll be discussing dialogue, including practical techniques and exercises you can start to utilize right away. And I'm going to just put that link in the chat, which I meant to do 30 seconds ago, but here we go. Here it is. So you can check that out. And make sure to bookmark it, because the information for the final 3 webinars will be announced soon. As always, if you're not an MWA member, please check out all that the membership has to offer. Meg, thank you so much. As someone in the chat said, thank you for re-energizing many of us writers. And I will say, as a non-writer, thank you for re-energizing us as readers as well. So
I'm delighted to hear it. Thank you. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Be well.